Sonic Prime is the perfect action cartoon for a modern audience, as there are 6 elements that this show does better than nearly every other action cartoon I've seen in recent time, from the most important to the most underrated. The biggest factor to the success of Sonic Prime is the main character, Sonic, a character that's generally written to be a lot more smug, cool, and short-sighted, given his incredible ability to fight crime really fast. And the biggest issue that smug and cool characters run into are avoided here, like being unlikable. Within the show, Sonic is shown to go in head first and ask questions later, which doesn't always pan out for him, often seen as an annoyance or detriment. This is actually what starts the 8-episode long conflict so far that Sonic, in an attempt to stop Eggman from picking up the Paradox Prism, charges towards it, despite his friends warning him not to, which leads into him being spread across the Shadowverse, the name for the universe these shards here create. His stubbornness and carelessness is balanced with a strong amount of accountability, a chill and optimistic demeanor, but most importantly, humor.
What I really want to know is, how did you get in here?
You left the door open.
Another aspect that ruins cool characters is if the story protects them. As you know, cool people don't take L's, at least on the surface level. Sonic, however, takes a lot of them within the show so far. As soon as he landed within New York City, the alternate Shadowverse where Eggman, or really the Egg Council, dominate Green Hill Zone, he's been met with people not believing that he's from another dimension, the strong force of the Egg Council's robots, and the crushing reality that his team balances out the flaws that he may have. However, a great character can only shine if there is a great world for them to inhabit. From the iconic Green Hill Zone to the dark and dictator-led New York City, to the tension-filled Boss Gage Maze, to the sparse aquatic No Place, each location had meaning and purpose, and mattered towards the story, shaping Sonic to be a different character after the adventure. Each different Shadowverse had a different interpretation of Green Hill Zone, with all of them being non-ideal, keeping Sonic and the viewer wanting to return home. As mentioned earlier, the Egg Council rules over New York City, and the environment really sells the bleakness of the situation. You have the cameras and robots constantly monitoring your every move, the dark palette chosen for the skies and cold metal buildings, but most importantly, the hopeless expressions of the citizens, portraying a city-wide broken spirit, in which Sonic ignites the spark of a revolution.
Nine? Are you out there, buddy? Rebel? Heck, I'd even take Nux at this point.
We trade a concrete jungle for a deserted jungle. The Boss Gage Maze, a vast and seemingly endless amount of flora, protected by a vengeful, familiar face who doesn't trust those who wish to eat from the jungle's labor. The biggest factor is that it's mostly concealed from the skies, separating the two sides, leaving speculation to drive them apart. However, my favorite location within the series would have to be the Grim. It's minor in the grand scheme of the show, but tells us the most about Nine, the counterpart of Tails within the dimension of New York City. Angry and full of hate about his previous environment, he takes the only person who's helped him out, Sonic, in the middle of a battle against the Egg Council and offers him a chance to experience a clean slate on a new world.
That city never brought me anything but misery. I owe it nothing. I'll help you get back.
Although this drives a wedge in Nine and Sonic's bond at the time, it showed how much Nine was willing to trust someone and how much Sonic cared about getting back to help his new friends. The world building was just enough for a casual viewer to get hooked in, but full of detail for even the most hardcore Sonic fan to get wrapped up in for months dissecting it all. Even with a great world, your bread and butter lies in animation when it comes to a strong first impression, which Prime knocks out of the park. Literally. Whether it is knocking characters across a large area, the glitchy nature of the Shadowverse and the Paradox Prism, or how intricate and personality-driven the fight scenes are, Sonic Prime takes full advantage of its 8 episodes to showcase a large variety of action-packed animation scenes. Even though you gotta go fast, the action is always clear and easy to follow. You can tell how much the team had a blast planning things, such as how Sonic's gear adapts to the environment in fun and effective ways. The biggest takeaway I had when watching these episodes is that a lot of them felt like a game. Take the scenes within barking up the wrong tree, where after Thornrose combines the prism shard with her hammer, begins smashing the ground, leaving giant, sharp, unforgiving thorns in her wake. Watching Sonic have to dodge these felt like what would happen if I were in a chase scene within a game, having to rely on my reflexes to press the right buttons on time to keep up with this counterpart of aiming. However, the intense action scenes are only as good as the breaks in between, which gives the audience time to slow down and sink in more information. But looks can only get you so far. You need a solid story too, which Sonic Prime absolutely had to nail. If you don't know much about the fandom, like any other franchise that's been around for several iterations, they're bound to compare. Imagine being the showrunner of a franchise that has such wildly polarizing opinions on what is good and bad, the differences between 2D and 3D Sonic, darker versus lighter interpretations, and whether Sonic X or Sonic Boom was actually good. Two shows which took two separate, arguably opposite executions of a story to wildly different results. If Sonic Prime's story wasn't good, even the hardcore fans will move on. The stakes were higher for Prime to work, especially given that Sonic television shows tend to be received mixed to poorly. However, with the success of Sonic Frontiers within the broad fandom, and how Sonic Boom managed to eke out a well-liked comedy-leaning action show that did not wish to follow in its serious predecessors, Prime was going to tell if the Sonic franchise was going to stay on the right path. And somehow, it did.
Over here! Pick me up! That's an order! Leave him be. There's not enough room. You showed us that you don't care, Captain.
You're the captain now, Jack.
An easy tactic was that each episode started with the juicy action parts that kept your attention, and only worried about the parts that led up to said action later, once it has your attention. The trap, however, with telling stories that you set up to only answer later is that you can run the risk of telling too much, which either doesn't keep the viewer curious enough to want to see the next episode, or bores the viewer as an exposition dump. Sonic Prime speeds around these obstacles by deliberately setting things up to not explain for a long time, such as exactly why Sonic was late in the first place leading up to the first battle. As we peel back the layers, so far we know it has to do with Shadow, but we don't know why Shadow was there in the first place.
Home doesn't exist anymore because of you!
The first 8 episodes leave it up in the air, which drives conversation about it within the fandom, but also allows for easy speculation for what the next batch of episodes will bring. From here, I would imagine most people stop when it comes to speaking about how much they like Prime, but it goes even deeper than that. You may think this is corny or lame, but the greatness of Prime is that everything leads back into one thing. From the greatest weakness in Sonic per episode, to the motivation loss and gain for Dread, the Knuckles counterpart within No Place, to the unique factor within the initial fight of Sonic and Nine, to the driving underlying tension of Thorn and the rest within the Boss Cage maze, to the resulting background design within the Boss Cage maze, to the reason Knux and Rebel work so well together within New York City, to the reason Nine trusted Sonic and only Sonic to start a new life in another dimension, to the biggest motivating factor of Sonic throughout the show: friendship. Sonic's greatest weakness is that he continually thinks that the interdimensional counterparts care for the friendships that he had with their original form, and thus has to continuously battle with who they actually are, what they care about, and why they act the way that they do.
Oh, come on, Amy. Why you gotta hate on him like that?
Even the way that he holds back in fights is to his detriment often, being at the losing end of fights that he can easily win. But that's the most endearing aspect of Sonic, that even though they see Sonic as a stranger, he will treat them as if they're best friends still. And that is the driving force that keeps Sonic on the path to getting home, but also the underlying layer that ties the stories within each of the Shadowverses together, creating the perfect action cartoon. However, the most underrated aspect of Sonic Prime was its use of cliffhangers, which if used effectively provide a clever way to engage someone long before they realize